What's up, everyone? The man, the myth, the mustache, Tim here. There's a lot going on, so let's just forgo the intro. Let's get this show going. Ow! What was that for? Midoriya shouted after rubbing his head. In front of him stood none other than his master, Rayleigh, and he was not happy. You know why I did it. You used it at almost full power while fighting that Todoroki kid. The silver-haired geezer responded, holding his clenched fist in front of him. Midoriya looked at his master with a look of confusion. He understood that Rayleigh was referring to his conqueror's Haki, but the green-haired boy couldn't recall using it during his match with Todoroki. What are you talking about? Midoriya asked, visibly confused. Rayleigh looked shocked at first, until he'd noticed the green-haired boy wasn't playing dumb. Ow! Midoriya exclaimed as Rayleigh hit him more furiously than before. You moron! You didn't even notice? Midoriya had nothing to say against his master, for he was right. The fact that Midoriya lost control of his conqueror's Haki, even for just a second, was not good. He is basically a bomb, and he needs to be able to control the output of his blast if he doesn't want to cause too much unnecessary damage. Next time you lose control over it, you're getting the club, Rayleigh said, sounding more ominous than before. Midoriya began to shiver at the mere mention of the club, because all he could think of was the pain he suffered during the blindfolded training. The green-haired boy continued to shiver in silence, until Rayleigh hit him again. Ow, what was that for? Midoriya shouted. Rayleigh just sighed before his signature goofy smile returned to him. There. Now I'm calm, the silver-haired geezer said, and Midoriya only felt more annoyed. Rayleigh then proceeded to walk away from his student after saying, Your next opponent is that Ida kid. I think we both know better than to underestimate him. But you won't need to use any conqueror's Haki. Listening to this, Midoriya managed to calm down before he responded. I know. You don't need to tell me that. Then Midoriya went on to prepare for the match. After proper preparation, both competitors had gathered in the ring. Ida stared Midoriya down with a burning determination because he wanted to win. The cavalry battle had left a scar on him, for the green-haired boy seemed to be able to defend against his reciprocal burst. But he was still determined to win. It didn't matter if his opponent could defend, he would just be faster. Midoriya was still as calm as ever. He looked unamused, as if he was already bored, but that was just a facade. On the inside, he was preparing himself for anything, using observation to try and figure out what his opponent was thinking and planning. He does have something to his advantage, though. A bluff. Midoriya could sense that Ida was making him seem like something he isn't, that he is much stronger than he actually was. The blue-haired boy probably thinks that Midoriya was faster than him in the cavalry battle, and the green-haired boy could definitely use this to his advantage. Begin! Midnight shouted, and both competitors sprung into action. Ida began charging immediately, and Midoriya stood guard. The blue-haired boy sent a kick towards Midoriya's side, but the green-haired boy simply blocked it with an armament-infused hand. Ida then followed with another kick to Midoriya's other side, only for it to meet the same result. The exchanges continued for a while. Ida kept sending powerful kicks, and Midoriya either blocked or avoided them. Then, Ida suddenly changed his angle, attempting to kick Midoriya over the skull. The green-haired boy saw this coming, however, but he was shocked to see that it was happening. In the middle of the swing, Ida's legs began to emit a blue flame. This almost made Midoriya panic as the blue-haired boy shouted, Reciprocal burst! Before the kick suddenly turned into a blur before crashing into Midoriya's skull. A loud bang could be heard, and it was followed by the already familiar sound of bones breaking. Everyone looked to the ring in fear, thinking that Ida had accidentally cracked open his opponent's skull, only to be shocked. The force had pushed Midoriya down to his knees, but that was all. He then stood back up as if nothing had happened. He looked over to Ida, who was in a lot of pain. Ida was balancing himself on one foot, because the other was broken. Ida's plan was simple and effective. By throwing kicks at a certain rhythm at a certain speed, he made Midoriya notice a form of pattern and fall into tunnel vision. That way he could make sure that the green-haired boy wouldn't be able to avoid the reciprocal kick, for it was activated at an unexpected time. It was a good plan, but there was one factor that would make its downfall. That factor being none other than the bluff. It was because of this bluff that Ida had to make such a hasty plan, and it made him miss one very important detail. He forgot that his own teammate Todoroki had tried to do something similar to what he just did. He tried to make direct contact with Midoriya's body at high speeds, only to break himself while trying. The audience was shocked, but among them was someone that didn't share that feeling. It was Rayleigh, after all, and he didn't know what to think of this. He was a little shocked, but that was only because of the fact that Ida had been dumb enough to attempt something like that. "Wow, what an idiot," Rayleigh boldly said as he pinched the bridge of his nose. Midoriya looked at Ida in genuine shock as he spoke. "Did you seriously try to kick me over the skull?" the green-haired boy asked, but he wouldn't get a response from his opponent. Midoriya just got more annoyed as he said, "You idiot," before charging at Ida. The blue-haired boy didn't have enough time to move before he received a powerful kick to the temple. The kick didn't have any Haki in it, but it was still enough to knock Ida unconscious. "That is how you kick someone," Midoriya said as Ida's unconscious body hit the ground. "Ida is unable to continue. Midoriya advances to the final round," Midnight announced before the crowd began to roar and bellow again. Rayleigh looked at his student with the same confliction as before All Might asked, "Did young Midoriya use Haki to block that kick to the head?" All Might was unable to tell what was happening. Rayleigh just sounded a little tired as he answered, "No, his skull's just really sturdy. Turns out that bones get stronger after taking some sort of punishment over a long period of time." This revelation made All Might confused until he realized something. Rayleigh wasn't afraid to hit Midoriya with an excessive amount of force, even when it served no particular purpose. Could Midoriya's skull have become super sturdy thanks to all that abuse? All Might looked to Rayleigh for some form of confirmation on that last thought, but he saw something else. He saw that Rayleigh was suddenly giggling while loosely swinging his fist in the air. This was enough for a confirmation, but it also seemed to scare All Might. He was afraid of both Rayleigh's abuse and Midoriya's well-being. The time had finally come, the match that would decide everything. The final round was here, and it was between Katsuki Bakugo and Izuku Midoriya. Bakugo was trying everything to make himself fully prepared, but nothing seemed to be working. He tried to get angry when thinking about Deku, but his mind was filled with something else. He didn't see a weak and annoying person anymore. Instead, he saw something unearthly that reeked of death. The blonde couldn't shake it, for he didn't know what it was. He felt his spirit trembling whenever he thought of Deku, and he just couldn't stop it. Why was this happening? What is this feeling? Those are questions he kept asking himself, but he kept denying himself the answer. He knew what it was deep down, but he refused to admit it. He refused to admit that it was fear, and that Deku was the source of it. Bakugo tried to shake these thoughts out of his head before walking his way down to the ring. Upon arriving, he noticed that Midoriya was already there, patiently waiting for him. He looked calm, unamused, and almost passive-aggressive. He looked as if he was ready to unleash hell, and it didn't help to cure Bakugo's fear. "Begin!" Midnight shouted, and so it began. The first one to act was Midoriya, who opened by charging and throwing a punch to Bakugo's stomach. The blonde didn't have enough time to react and took it full force. Bakugo then tried to counter, but it would amount to nothing. His explosion connected with nothing as he received another blow to the head. Bakugo staggered backwards as his vision started to get blurry. He could barely balance himself, and the world seemed to twist and turn into a nightmarish whirlpool. The blonde then began to shiver while rubbing his arms as if he was freezing. An expression of pure terror was deeply plastered onto his face as his body hunched over and cowered. What he saw could only be explained as a demon from the darkest pits of hell. He saw Midoriya, but there was no way that he was human. The green-haired boy wore his usual calm expression while his shadow stood up and took an odd shape behind him. The shadow didn't reflect his silhouette like it usually did. Instead, it took the shape of various monsters that Bakugo had seen before. In it, he could see a shadow of the sludge villain, along with the silhouette of the Nomu from the USJ. On top of that, he could see the shadow of Rayleigh, along even All Might. Bakugo saw all of these shadows behind Midoriya, as if he was a much greater threat than all of them. Bakugo trembled more violently than before, until Midoriya moved again. The green-haired boy had dashed and hit him in the gut once more, before throwing him to the ground. Bakugo was lying on his back, still cowering in fear. The green-haired boy towered over him with a menacing glare, before he reeled his fist back. Bakugo closed his eyes and waited, for he didn't want to look at this anymore. He waited, and he could almost feel the fist approaching him at rapid speeds, until something happened. Bakugo's eyes opened once more, and were shocked to see that Midoriya's fist had stopped just centimeters from his face. The world around him seemed normal once again as he heard the green-haired boy speak. "What the hell happened to you, Kacchan?" Midoriya said. Bakugo looked at the green-haired boy only to see that his expression was a weird mixture between anger and concern. "Why are you terrified all of a sudden? What do you have to be afraid of?" Midoriya shouted. Bakugo still didn't respond, and Midoriya just got more annoyed. "You challenged me, Kacchan. You wanted to face me. I wanted to face you too, but I have no interest in fighting a man who is afraid of his own shadow," the green-haired boy said before he took a few steps away from Bakugo. The blonde sat himself up as he looked at Midoriya. "You have 10 seconds to get back up. 10 seconds before I walk out of this ring and forfeit the match," the green-haired boy said, before slowly proceeding to walk towards the edge of the ring. Bakugo's fear was quickly drowned out by bewilderment. He was gonna forfeit? Just like that? One part of Bakugo felt relieved, but the other felt angry. He was angry over the fact that Midoriya would even say something like that he had the balls to do so. More importantly, he hated the idea of letting Midoriya win. Bakugo's expression quickly turned into one of rage as he stood up and fired an explosion. The blast was aimed right next to Midoriya, missing him by a hair. The green-haired boy didn't even flinch as he stopped and slowly turned back to Bakugo. "Get your ass back here and fight, Deku!" Bakugo shouted, sounding as angry as he usually did. The green-haired boy smiled ever so slightly after hearing this as he replied, "There you are. I was waiting for you to arrive. Now we can actually fight." Bakugo heard this comment by Midoriya and grinned as he replied, "Let's do this, Deku!" before taking a stance. Midoriya also grinned as he responded, "Hell yeah, Kacchan!" before taking a stance of his own. Rayleigh smiled upon witnessing this. While it was dumb to help your opponent during a battle, he still liked what he was seeing. What he saw showed that both fighters cared, and that they refused to give up on each other. Midoriya gave Bakugo a chance to be his rival, and the blonde didn't hesitate to grab that chance. "Finally! Now they can fight for real!" the silver-haired geezer said as he continued to watch the match. The fighters charged at each other, both adamant to win. Midoriya had covered both arms and legs with Haki, while Bakugo used his explosions. Eventually they clashed, and one thing was made very clear immediately. Midoriya had the advantage in strength and speed and many other categories. This fact made the audience immediately believe that Bakugo had no hope of winning. The duel raged on with intensity. Midoriya held the upper hand at the beginning, but slowly it became noticeable that they were equal. Then the almost impossible happened. Bakugo began to control the fight as if he was the superior one. Now the spectators didn't know what was happening. Even the #1 hero himself was confused. "I don't get it. Young Midoriya is clearly superior in almost every field. So why is he being pushed back?" All Might asked, letting his confusion be known. Rayleigh stood next to him and continued to smile. "You can't tell? It's because of that Bakugo kid. He's a genius." All Might was even more confused as he prompted Rayleigh to explain. "He's learned since his last fight with Midoriya, and he knows better than to challenge his opponent at their own game," the silver-haired geezer explained. All Might was still confused until he took a closer look at the battle. Bakugo wasn't throwing his attacks at random. It was clear that every single one of them was carefully planned and calculated. Then it hit him. Bakugo was indeed a genius. The blonde knew that he couldn't hope to match Midoriya. He was clearly outmatched in every field, but this didn't mean that he couldn't win. He would just have to be smart and respond to Midoriya's attacks with their natural counter. By doing it this way, he could negate the gap between them, and he could take control of the battle. Rayleigh's smile grew wider as the battle went on. He was smiling over the fact that his student had found someone that he could let loose with, someone that could properly rival him. Bakugo continued his assault over Midoriya, growing more violent as time passed. The green-haired boy was backed into a corner, and nothing he did seemed to be working. The blonde then sent an explosion into Midoriya's stomach, making him stagger and fall to his knees. Bakugo didn't let this opportunity slip, as he decided to finish it. The blonde used his explosion to spin himself at high speeds until he shouted, "Howitzer, impact!" before firing what was arguably the biggest explosion he's ever made. The entire stadium shook from the impact as the massive fireball engulfed the green-haired boy entirely. The audience, mainly Class 1A and All Might, were horrified. They thought Midoriya would have been seriously hurt, or even killed for that matter. Their worry stopped, however, when a powerful wave was sent out in all directions. It was similar to the one that appeared during the second round, except this one was far more powerful. The entire stadium shook under the pressure that it created, and almost half the audience fell unconscious. Not even Midnight, Cementos, and President Mike could fight against this incredible force. Bakugo recognized this power, for he had felt it before. It was exactly the same as the thing he had experienced when he was 4 years old, except now it was way stronger. The blonde couldn't fight it for much longer either, as he too fell unconscious. Then the wave suddenly vanished, and everything seemed to be back to normal. The audience was stunned to silence. No one dared to even utter a sound. Then they could see something stand up in a cloud of smoke. Upon closer inspection, they saw that it was Midoriya, and he was still conscious. Alright, that was bizarre, Aizawa said through the speaker after taking the mic. The tired teacher almost sounded shell-shocked, as he then proceeded to say, Midnight is unconscious, but I think it goes without saying that Izuku Midoriya won the match. The audience was still silent after hearing this, but they quickly picked up the pace and began to cheer for the winner of the sports festival. Midoriya looked for Bakugo until he found him unconscious on the floor. The green-haired boy walked up to the blonde before he picked him up. Midoriya then proceeded to carry Bakugo out of the ring, making the audience cheer even more because of the sportsmanship. Rayleigh was still awake during all of this, but he wasn't cheering. He was silent and completely still. He didn't say a word, but one could still tell that he was angry, if not furious. The silver-haired geezer then left the stands, as if he was off looking for something. After everyone regained consciousness and was informed of the match results, the award ceremony began. Ida had to leave due to family issues, so Tokiyami was alone on the third-place pedestal with a bronze medal. Bakugo was standing on the second-place pedestal, passive-aggressive, as All Might gave him his silver medal. Then All Might walked up to Midoriya and gave him his golden medal. The stadium cheered and bellowed, congratulating the many contestants. After the ceremony, Midoriya was swarmed by his classmates. They all congratulated him, while also asking how he managed to do certain things, and if he actually was quirkless. The green-haired boy started to get annoyed by the constant question about him having a quirk, but he didn't get to voice that annoyance when Todoroki spoke up. Hey Midoriya, he said, his voice being as cold as always. Midoriya looked at him a little confused, before the bi-colored teen continued. Well done, he said, as he smiled and raised his hand for a fist bump. Midoriya smiled back at the ice user as he said, Thanks, Brain Freeze, before giving Todoroki a fist bump. Hey Deku! Bakugo shouted. Midoriya turned towards him and was surprised by what happened next. The blonde also held his hand out for a fist bump as he said, You did well, but I'll be taking that medal from you next time. Midoriya was shocked to hear this, but he gave Bakugo a smile and said, Thanks, and I'd love to see you try, before fist bumping him as well. The class then returned to their gleeful conversing, quickly returning to the topic of Midoriya having a quirk. This was stopped, however, when an old voice shouted, Hey Midoriya! Midoriya recognized this voice, and he began to tremble because he knew what it meant. The class turned to the source of the voice, only to find an angry Rayleigh swinging a massive club in one of his hands. Remember what I said? Before your match with that Ida kid? The silver-haired geezer said as he waved the massive club around playfully. Midoriya already knew what was coming, so he smiled awkwardly while putting his hands up and saying, Hey, let's talk about this. Rayleigh just looked more annoyed as he responded, I'm done using my words with you. It's clear they don't get through that thick skull of yours. I'll have to beat it out of you. Before he charged towards Midoriya. The green-haired boy panicked as he screamed and ran away. Please have mercy, he shouted, but his master only answered with a cold, You know better than to beg me for mercy. Class 1A watched this entire scene play out until they all burst out laughing. They laughed so hard they had tears in their eyes. Even Todoroki and Bakugo did so. They knew that this was actually cruel and they shouldn't be laughing, but they just couldn't help themselves. Midoriya, arguably one of the strongest students in their class who rarely showed any emotions, was running in fear. He was actually running away with his tail between his legs because he was terrified of what his master might do to him. The class continued to laugh uncontrollably. Even when the master and student were long gone, they all continued to laugh together. And that's our video for the day, so thank you all for watching and indulging yourselves in our story thus far. I hope you've enjoyed it. I know I have, and that's not because I'm narrating this. It's actually pretty well done. Now, there's a few things I need to go over before the video ends. First, we've got a second channel called Anime Deep Dive. Anime Deep Dive goes over the hard facts and lore of a wide variety of anime. It's sure to expand your weeb knowledge of all kinds, guaranteed. On top of that, we have a third channel called We the Celestials Naruto What Ifs. It's what we do on this channel already, but in the vast world of Naruto. So go check that out if you're in the mood for some ninja action. Secondly, on behalf of We the Celestials, I want to thank everyone involved in the production of today's awesome content. Their details will be in the description below. Finally, if you're interested in what we do here at We the Celestials, then I want to extend an invitation to join the team. We only have one caveat: you have to be 16 years or older to join our crew. You can sign up for whichever category fulfills your interest by joining the recruitment Discord using the link in the description below. Now, our Discord is an all-around fantastic place to be, whether you be a fan or just looking to join our band of misfits. And so that's it from us for today's video. So thank you all for watching, and please, y'all have an amazing day. Mustache out.